So the first couple things we're going to talk about is some terminology. And you actually mentioned saying you want to learn ebooks. And I also heard you say real books. And I think hopefully in the next year or two, we'll realize these are real books. I understand physical books and all that, but I hear that a lot. Like these maybe aren't quite so much real books, but they are. And I think, you know, that's where a lot of it is going. I read most of my books digitally that way. But there's a lot of terminology people don't understand. And some of it gets confusing when we have things like iBooks and iBooks author, which are two separate things, but they have sort of the same name. And then we have this term called ebooks. So I want to start there with ebooks. So ebooks is sort of a general umbrella term for any book that you read digitally or electronically on a device. So it might be your computer, it might be a tablet, it might be your smartphone, it might be an actual e-reader, you know, like the Kindle or the Nook or something like that. So anything that you read that way is an ebook. And actually, as designers, I don't know how many people here are designers versus photographers, but as a designer, I've been making ebooks for a long time. I just didn't call them that. They're called PDFs, right? So we make PDFs that maybe aren't going to print, but they were intended to be put, say, on a website that we're going to read, we're going to download and read, usually on the computer at the time, before we got our tablets and our smartphones and all that. And so that's an ebook. It's an electronic book, and a book is also sort of a misnomer because it doesn't necessarily have to be a book. It can be a pamphlet or a portfolio or just a flyer, actually, but it's still an e-book. It's an electronic book. So that's that kind of general term. And underneath there's a couple other sorts of ebooks that are out there. EPUB is one you might have heard of, and that's not something we're covering today, but just so you kind of get an idea when you're thinking about, do I want to make an iBooks author project? Or we were talking earlier about, with someone earlier this morning, I was talking about how, you know, they want to get out there into all the different markets that are out there. So just kind of keep in mind what can be used in other formats, like the EPUB. So the EPUB is what you'd probably do if you downloaded the latest novel. Let's say you went to go get the Hunger Games or something, and you went to either the Kindle store, or the iBook store, the Barnes & Noble, Nook store, whatever, and you want to read it on your device, on your tablet. And that would be an EPUB, and that's flowable type. So that's the kind where the reader, the person actually doing the reading, can change the font size and the font itself. As a reader, I love this. As a designer, it makes my hair stand on end a little bit, right? Because I want control over what it looks like. But when I teach the EPUB classes, I tell everybody, you gotta kind of give and take so that the reader has a little more control over what is seen. And that's an EPUB, and that's an actual file format. And a lot of people, I think, sometimes say they want an ebook, and what they're really thinking is EPUB. So just kind of keep those two in mind. EPUB is a specific file type, and an ebook is this generic type. One of the other things you might have seen are digital magazines. So for instance, if you're on an iPad and you've opened up Newsstand and you get the latest edition of Mac Life magazine, you open that up and that's a magazine, it's a digital magazine. And that's a whole different workflow as well. But the nice thing about that is that you have control over what your final product looks like. And that's exactly what we're going to end up with iBooks, is we have control over what it looks like. We're not letting the reader, person reading it, take over that. All right, so keep that in mind as well. And what we're making with iBooks Author is what's called a multi-touch book. And that just is a fancy way of saying we're putting interactivity in it. We can touch it and do things to it, and we're going to look at one in just a second. We're going to actually look at what all is possible inside of iBooks Author. So that being said, that's what the final product is this multi-touch book. And we pretty much, for the most part, we're going to talk about where we get them. We're going to buy them on the iBook store. And we're going to talk about distribution later in the afternoon, where we can put them. But basically, when you make an iBooks Author project, you create this multi-touch book, and you can either sell it through Apple or give it away through many different avenues that we'll talk about in the afternoon. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you're going to sell it, if there's going to be money, Apple's going to be involved. Apple wants their cut, and that's okay because they're going to take care of the heavy lifting for us, right? But they're going to give us the software, because the iBooks Author software is my favorite price. It's free. Or as a friend of mine says, free 99. It's my absolute favorite price. All right, so we're going to look at that. We're going to actually look at a sample in just a few minutes, just to kind of give you an idea of what's out there. But if you are a designer, this is one of the places where we're going to have to let go a little bit, because this kind of software, if you're a photographer, this is going to be great. You're going to love this, because you're going to have all your beautiful photos, and we're going to start dropping them into templates. So I think the key word for today, you'll probably hear me say it a lot, is that it's template driven. And that's a good thing if you're not into designing. If you're into designing, you're going to get a little frustrated, but I'm going to show you some great workarounds in the afternoon. So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to look at how to work within the template, because the templates are great, they're set up, and then in the afternoon we're going to do some customizing, so that those of you that want to break out of the template can. Those of you that just want to put a book together really quickly, you guys are into photography, you're going to love this. You're going to start just throwing things in there and making beautiful things. And you might want to do some customization, but for the most part, you might stick with the template. So we're going to do that in the morning. So it's template driven. The templates are there, it's easy, it's an Apple product. If anybody's used Keynote or Pages, Keynote, it's going to look exactly like it, so much like it that I was trying to do something in iBooks Author earlier, and it was actually Keynote. And so just my brain wasn't flipping between the two. They look so familiar. All right, so if you've used those products, if you're working in the Apple ecosystem, you're going to love it. You're going to be used to it. So when we publish this, when we make our final multi-touch book, the one big thing to keep in mind is the only place you can look at it is on an iPad. You can't even put it on an iPhone. All right, so there is no way to view these multi-touch books on an iPhone. So you can buy it, you think you're going to get it on your phone, and it's not going to go on your phone. So keep that in mind. iPad only. And we're going to talk about some of the more specific requirements in a minute, but just keep that in mind. So if where you're publishing this, if the people that you want to get this to don't have iPads, you're spinning your wheels. So just keep that in mind. And that's something I always try to keep, tell people to keep in the forefront of their mind is anytime you're producing anything digitally right now, and I think it's probably going to be this way for quite some time, you kind of have to know the workflow and the distribution channels and who's reading it. Same thing if you're doing digital magazines, you have to know, are you publishing it for Android or for the Apple iOS, or both? And then there's two different roads you have to take. So you're always going to have to be thinking. It's not like in print, if you're used to printing your photo books or any other books that you've designed, where you print it, it's on paper. Pretty much everybody knows what to do with a piece of paper. Anybody can go buy a piece of paper and look at it. Whereas now we're distributing it digitally, and we have to kind of know who the end users are and what they have. All right, so kind of keep that in mind. So iPad only for that. And again, it's free distribution anywhere. If you want to charge for it, we go through Apple. So let's actually do a little bit of show and tell. And the great thing about this, what I like, is that you get all this interactivity and you get an interactive app for your iPad without any coding. How many people love coding? I'm sure we all love coding. No, we don't love coding. I've been dabbling in coding, and I love that I can do some stuff in coding, but I really don't like it. I like it to a point, and then my head explodes, and then I go back to making pretty pictures. So yeah, so we don't, that's what I like to do. So I'm going to actually show you on the iPad. We're going to actually look at a sample of this, because I want to kind of show, this is, I always tell people, this is not a home improvement show where we're going to build up for the commercial breaks all day to the big reveal at the end of the show, right? We're going to do the big reveal first, because there's nothing more frustrating than saying, here's how you do this stuff, but the whole time you're like, I'm not really sure, what are we doing? What are we making? So let's look at what we get as an end result, and then we'll go back and start breaking it down and figure out how to get there. So I'm going to make sure I'm actually on. I believe I am, and my iPad hopefully is going to show here. And I'm just going to open up one of the samples that I have, and actually we are good on that. And the first thing it opens up to is a video, which is kind of nice. So I have this video that's in here, so we can drop video in and see, you know, just kind of an intro video. We can stop that at any time, just tapping on the screen. I'm going to hit done, and it automatically goes to the first page in my book. So all I'm going to do is open up some pages. We're just going to look at the sorts of things that we put into this particular sample. All right, so I'm just going to look. We've got some pictures here, obviously. I'm just going to swipe just to change the page. Look through at some of the text that's in here. And the first thing I see is this map. And what this map is, these are widgets, and we're going to learn about widgets later in the day as well. This is where we take all this interactivity, and Apple made it easy. Widgets, drop it in, tell it what kind it is, drop the assets in there, some photos, videos, whatever we're doing, and it makes it. And you know how it does it? It does it through magic. So I just want everybody to know that that will be the other keyword today. It's just magic. All right? So I dropped this Keynote app in here, and this is actually from Keynote. I created it in Keynote. It's an interactive Keynote file that's there, and I can put it in here, and I maintain all the interactivity. So I'm just going to actually tap it, and I've got the names of the neighborhoods down below. So this is a map of Venice, and so these are the different neighborhoods, and I can tap down below. I'm going to just tap on the Dorsa Duro. That's where I stayed, that nice little quiet neighborhood. And when I tap on it, it changed, because it's, again, it's interactivity that's built into Keynote, and it maintains itself when we drop it into iBooks. All right, so I can just come in here. I'm using the right and left arrow keys now to just scroll through. So if we want something that's interactive like that, we can't necessarily do that right in iBooks Author, but we can build in Keynote and drop that in. If you have a Keynote presentation, you can have it so that it self-runs. We tap it in iBooks Author, and it just runs that Keynote. And that's really great because they have things like animation that's in there, and you can drop video and audio and things like that in there as well. Put all that together in a Keynote, drop it in here as a Keynote widget, and we can go from there. I'm just going to scroll to the right. And I have here just a gallery of images. And I have little thumbnails along the bottom. I can tap on those and see the different images that are here. Or I can swipe across the images. The other thing is I might want to see this full screen. So I can just do the pinch to zoom. So I'm going to pinch to zoom and I suddenly have it full screen. If I tap, my background goes away and I have just the beautiful images that are here. Now I'm just going to scroll through here and just look at the images that way. You have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question.
Sure.
Can you put a slideshow in here too? Like, would you be able to have a slideshow on that one screen, or
a slideshow, an actual self-playing slideshow?
Right.
No, you could do that through Keynote as well, though. But
okay.
yeah, this one it's a manually advanced slideshow as well.
Awesome.
So that's exactly what I have is just a slideshow here. I just have to manually tap each one to get it to happen. And again, if you have something that fills up this whole page, one thing you have to keep in mind, I'm trying to swipe left and right on the page, but sometimes you accidentally swipe left or right on the image itself, which is kind of annoying sometimes. So if you have your gallery take up the whole page, just be aware you need to leave a little bit of room for people to actually advance the pages for you. And you might even want to put something in the beginning, how to navigate through your books. Now keep in mind, because it's iBooks Author, if anybody else has had an iBooks Author multi-touch book, they're probably familiar with how to move it, but sometimes they might not be. Like I know when I get like digital magazines sometimes, I don't realize, oh, if I had swiped up on this, there was more, and I was missing it. And I always joke that, you know, with a book, we never had to explain, to turn the page, grab the lower right-hand corner and gently move over this way, right? So we kind of just know how to do that. So people need a little guidance with this, you know, the new books and how to move these things around. But keep that in mind when you're creating something, that you leave room for people to swipe and move. So for instance, here I have an image that you will only see the right-hand side. When I swipe and move that, it continues across the page. So we're going to look at that, how we can have images go across entire pages. Now, if you see that this is pretty much what we call a landscape layout. This is a landscape layout. We also can do a portrait layout, because keep in mind, we're on an iPad. We're on a device here that if I turn it, let's hope it plays nicely. There we go. We're now in this kind of flowing text. You notice my pictures are gone. A lot of things are here over off in the left-hand margin. So they assume that when you're working in the portrait orientation, that you're pretty much focused on the text. And here's something different that you get on the text as well. If I tap on that, up in the upper right-hand corner, I have the little font sizes. That looks a lot like iBooks when I'm reading an EPUB, where I can make the type bigger or smaller. So as a reader, I have a little bit more control over it in this layout. This is more focused on the text, whereas the other way is more focused on the layout and the look of the photos. So if you're doing a photo book, you're probably going to work in the landscape orientation. Let's get back to this one that I had here. If I want to bring up the table of contents, I can do that. I'm tapping on the screen. And up in the upper left, I have a little table of contents lines that are here. And it may go right to table of contents, or you might get this table of contents and glossary. If there's a glossary included, you get that little menu. Otherwise, what you'll get is table of contents, and you'll get the little thumbnails along the bottom. So I can scroll along those and see everything that's in this section. I've got little dots down at the bottom. If I tap on those, I can see the next section and the next section. And so let's go back to the Venice one, and I want to find this last page. I just tapped on it, and I have a 3D model in here. And I'm going to pinch to zoom so it fills the screen. And then I'm just going to tap on it and hold and drag around. So I've got 3D modeling that's in here. So originally when Apple came out with this was for textbooks. Wouldn't that have been awesome to learn your textbooks back in school with this? I would have read a lot more. I saw one that had a DNA, the helix, and I just could not stop spinning that thing and just watching it, come apart and everything. It was great. So yeah, so you've got 3D models that are in here. That's one of the widgets that you can do. And again, it's a matter of just having those assets and dragging them into a widget. And we're going to look at how to customize all that. So I just want to kind of show you some of the things that are in here. So basically it's photos. Oh, we also have this one too. I'm going to pinch to zoom just to bring it up full screen. And I have two little tags that are on here. And I can click on one, and it zooms in a little bit, and then it shows you some information about that. I can tap to go back on this little dot, so it brings it back full screen again, and tap on the next one, and it zooms in and shows me that information. So that's an interactive image. So if you have something you want to point out, all sorts of things in your images, let's say you were doing a photography workbook or something like that, you could point out the parts of the camera or whatever, something like that. That would be great. So I'm going to tap on it. I get the X in the upper left-hand corner, and I'm going to click to close that. I'm going to tap somewhere off of everything that's on the page. Again, you want to leave some space. I mean, it's a good design idea anyway, but you definitely want to leave some space for people to be able to tap on the screen. So when I tap on the screen, I can click Library, and that brings me back to my bookshelf. And again, that's where my books will end up. You notice some of them say proof, some of them say new. We're going to look at proofs throughout the day. That's something that we need to do as we go along. We need to keep checking, because some of the things we can see in iBooks Author, and some of them we can't. We have to actually, like the Keynote one, you have to actually have it on the iPad to see all that interactivity. So having an iPad is crucial. So I'm going to take that off. I'm going to go back to my desktop here. So I want to talk about some of the workflow considerations. So I know we haven't started diving in yet to the really good stuff. How do we make this stuff? But this is stuff you need to think about ahead of time. And I think it's very obvious in iBooks Author, because iBooks Author, again, here's our word, template driven. Because it's template driven, you really do have to have an outline of how you want to put the book together, because it doesn't allow for a lot of rearranging afterwards. It assumes you kind of have something either written or you've got all your images or something like that. We're just putting it all together in iBooks Author. So we want to keep that in mind on some of those. So if you are a designer, your workflow may already be that you have your book in some other format. You might have it in InDesign or something like that, and you're working in the Adobe workspace. Well, this is the Apple workspace. And never the twain shall meet, right? We just, they're kind of walled off a little bit. There's some good workarounds that I've come up with that, because I do everything in InDesign, and a lot of my clients actually have everything in InDesign for print, or maybe they've gone to EPUB or PDFs or something in the past, and we're trying to incorporate iBooks Author into that. So we'll look at some of those later as well, some of the little workarounds we have to do with that, but it is possible. You might be starting in iBooks Author, but also want to do a print version later. So you may be needing to go out to some of those other programs. So as a designer, like I say, you may be working in the InDesign, Photoshop, Illustrator workflow. Think about how this, throughout the day, be thinking about how this will fit into that workflow. If you're starting from scratch, that's great, because you're going to just make it in here. You're a photographer, you already have some text in your head you want to do it, or maybe you've got it in a text file or something like that. You're just going to be gathering up your assets and putting it together, and that will be great. If you're a publisher or an author, you may be working in something like Word or Apple Pages. And of course, Apple Pages is a great way to do it because it's part of the Apple ecosystem, and it's easy to bring that in. They've also made it pretty easy to bring in stuff from Word. It's not always pretty, but that's all right. We're used to that. But we'll bring that in, and we can actually get the stuff from Word and bring it into iBooks Author as well. So at least Apple has realized that a lot of authors probably are writing in Word, so it's a good idea to have that interactivity with that as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. You also might be using standalone apps. You might have been making things in, like the 3D model is something that you can make in Google SketchUp. And so that's something that we could make in there. We might be working in an image editing software that is not Photoshop. We might be using Photoshop Elements, we might be using Lightroom, we might be using, I do a lot of on-screen stuff in Keynote, actually. If I just want a JPEG, I'll just go into Keynote because it's just easy, drag and drop, put it together, export it as a JPEG, and now I have it either for other Keynote applications, or sometimes I take that and put it on my website. It's just an easy way. And I tell a lot of people that don't have Photoshop. I have Photoshop, but it's just easier sometimes. And I tell people to use Keynote because it's inexpensive, or they might already have it on their Mac. And it's a nice image editing software if you're going just to on-screen. Obviously, printing is a whole nother animal. So you might have all those applications as well. And then you want to gather your assets. So again, kind of an outline either for the workflow and an outline for how you want your book to look. And so kind of keep that in mind. So this is all before we get into the prettiness that is iBooks Author, right? So it's kind of the administrative stuff we have to do ahead of time. So then gather up our assets. So we want to make sure we have all our photos that we're going to use in this particular project. We may have them sitting in a folder, which is great. We can put them all in a folder. But it incorporates really well with iPhoto, right? Because it's an Apple product. And there's a nice widget right inside to open up and see all your albums that you've made in iPhoto. So even if I have them in a folder, I've been putting them into iPhoto. And then I just make a special album in iPhoto that has the breakdown. So you might even put Chapter 1, Venice, Chapter 2, Florence, and actually have them broken down. Otherwise, you're trying to scroll through, and we're going to see that we have a lot of palettes open by the end of the day, and sometimes trying to find the screen real estate to fit them all in is a little tricky. So by having them broken down into albums, at least, you're not scrolling through. Like I have, I think, 400 pictures of Italy. You know, I don't have to scroll through all those. So I break them down. I've already chosen the ones that I thought went well in the book, and I've made an album just for those. So I don't have to go through all the ones that maybe didn't look so good that I took on my iPhone, something like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's actually, you know, I was telling you earlier that I started playing around with the iBooks author program last night, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to start laying some stuff out. And then I realized very quickly that, wait a minute, I kind of need an outline. I need to think about this and figure out my organization and what topics I even want to put in here to start with.
Right, exactly.
So,
and I think having that laid out is a really good idea. If you have an outlining software, that would be excellent as well, to kind of just put your thoughts in order, because like I said, sometimes once you start putting it in order, we're going to look at how when we rearrange things in iBooks, sometimes it doesn't work, especially if you're used to working with something like even Word actually, or Pages or InDesign. You're used to saying, oh, I don't want this page here, let's move this page. And iBooks author says, yeah, no, you put it there. It's kind of there, and you can copy and paste. There's a little bit of workaround. So again, having a good game plan is really a good idea. So yeah, definitely an outline is good. Getting all your assets together. I like putting, like say, in iPhoto, so I have my albums, things like that, all ready to go. So the other things you want to do is probably get any of your text files together that you have, if you've already got text living somewhere else. We're going to look at bringing in text from different places, but pretty much any text you have, we can copy and paste. We're going to look at that as well. So rich text files, plain text files, Word files. Even if you have InDesign files, you can copy and paste between those as well if you want to. So you've already got it somewhere else, you can bring that in that way. And then any other layouts that you might have. You might have it in InDesign, you might have it in Pages. Gather those all up as well. We're going to look at some of the limitations to that, how it has to be set up. And again, it's one of those bumpy things where it's like, I need to get the InDesign stuff in here, and I don't want to duplicate my work. It's not always pretty, but it saves me having to replace images throughout the day in iBooks Author. So we'll look at that. So I gather up everything I think is going to go into this book, and then I'm ready to go. So now let's talk about the requirements for the system requirements, all that good stuff. And as I like to say, these are accurate as of, well, last night probably. But you know, to quote Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast, and if you don't check which version of software you have, you might miss something. I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but you know, it's current now. Always go to Apple and check. And the great thing is, when we go to publish this later, it's going to tell you, oh, you need this. Do you have this? Click here. If you don't have it, it's going to say, oh, you need the new version. And sometimes I know that it's like, oh, I was ready to publish, and you just keep stepping backwards. Oh, I need this. I need the new version of this. Okay. So right now, as of last night, what you need iBooks Author 2. Now here's the great part. It's free. I told you that. You get that on the Mac App Store. So, and I didn't say at the beginning, this is a Mac-only program. I just probably figured most people that try to put it on the PC probably already figured that out. But sorry about that. It is a Mac-only program. So you need a Mac. You need to have Lion 10.7. So if you don't have Lion, you will have to upgrade to that. You go into the Mac App Store, which probably lives in your dock. Let's see if I don't have it down here in my dock, but yours probably lives in your dock. It's the Mac App Store. You can always go to apple.com and get that. And look for iBooks Author. And it's going to be there, and it's free. Like I said, you download it. It's going to tell you if you don't have the right system, you'll be set. So we install that. So we need to have that to create the books. And actually, if that's all we're going to do is create the books and distribute them via email to our friends, we're fine for most of the stuff. So some of the other things that you need is you'll need iTunes Producer if you want to publish. And you're also going to need, you need Keynote 09, but it's version 5.2 if you want to use any of the Keynote widgets. So it hooks into Keynote in a strange and magical way. When you put a Keynote widget in, if you don't have Keynote on your machine and you don't have the right version, it won't let you do that. So I think it's odd. I don't believe it did that in version 1 if you guys are using version 1. Version 1 came out a year ago, And version 2 of iBooks Author came out in October, and they made some great improvements. And since it's free, I really don't understand why you wouldn't want to upgrade. So go ahead and upgrade to that. But you need to have Keynote for that. The iTunes producer, and we'll talk about this when we go to actually publish later, but the iTunes producer is the thing that sort of handles taking the book and sending it to the iBook store in the sky, right? So that's how it handles that. You're going to need a couple other things. You're going to need an Apple ID. So you probably have one if you've bought anything on iTunes ever. So you have an Apple ID. And we're going to talk about again when we publish later the different types of IDs that are there and the different types of accounts that we'll need. But to get started, we need Apple iBooks Author 2 on our machine ready to go. Keynote if we're going to use that. And you might want image editing software. If you don't already have something, Lightroom, Photoshop, Photoshop Elements, any of those, something on there to work with the images. And there are some image editing effects that we can do inside iBooks Author as well. So even if you have a photo that's there and it doesn't look great, you can tweak it somewhat. But you guys being photographers, I'm going to assume your pictures look great already, right? We don't have to worry about that at all. And the other thing that you really need is an iPad, right? So if you don't have an iPad, you can work with it and produce whatever you want, but there's no way to tell that what you're producing on here is actually how it's supposed to look. And you're going to need a sync cable, which you probably have because, well, you have an iPad and it should have come with one. So you need that because we need to send proofs over to our iPad throughout the day as we're working on this and see that. So you want to have that so you can constantly check, make sure that, because there's no other way to really tell what things look like. And we'll see that as like when we did the picture across the page, where those two come together, there's a gray line, and it kind of bothers me. There's no, I can squint a little bit sometimes and get rid of that. But if I throw it on the iPad, I can make sure that everything's lined up beautifully. And it's a pretty quick process to do that. So does that make sense? Everybody good on that? Getting everything ready? Makes sense. Any quick questions? Any questions from out in the internet anywhere about anything that we've gone over?
We definitely have some of those.
Okay, great. Let's do those now.
This is actually a really good question. I think this is going to be one that a lot of people are wondering about. And that's about just the rights that Apple has. So this is from the Rainy Day store, and they ask, if I create an iBook, does Apple have the rights? Can I move it to another type of ebook?
Okay, yeah, and I was going to cover that in the afternoon, but I noticed that was on the discussions yesterday as well. Apple doesn't own anything that you make. If you make the iBooks format, so we're making that multi-touch version, you can only sell it on the book. These are the restrictions. You can only sell it through Apple. You can give it away wherever you want. You can give away or sell or do whatever you want in any of the other formats that you can make. So directly from iBooks Author, you can make a PDF or you can make plain text. And Apple doesn't care what you do with them, where you sell them or anything. The actual content, copy, paste, whatever, that's yours. You can do whatever. So it's only when you create that .ibooks file, which is the multi-touch format for the iBook store, that they care if you're making money. And if you don't make money, they still don't care about what you do with it.
Okay.
So I know there was confusion in the very beginning, and I think that's still stuck in people's heads. So yes, you absolutely own everything. And if you're selling it in the .ibooks format for money, Apple wants you to do it through them.
Great.
All right, question from Julianne_NZ, Julianne from New Zealand. Can you have certain pages in the iBook that could be printable, for example, like a worksheet or an image that your friends can print out?
You could save it out as a PDF, the entire book as a PDF. And it's not going to be print quality because it's optimizing it always for the digital output. It's optimizing it for your iPad. So keep that in mind. If you start putting it, you've got some high resolution photos, we put them in, it's going to optimize it, and when we print it, it's not going to look great. It'd be fine for handouts or something like that, but it's not going to be high quality print. So yeah, you absolutely, but you'd have to do it as a PDF. Yep, absolutely.
We've got a couple questions. One's from Canon, one's from Brenny. These were related though. They're wondering if the books that you create with iBooks Author work on all the different iPads, including the first generation, the iPad
They
mini.
do not. They recommend not on an iPad 1. I know I was running mine on my iPad 1 when I first got it, but I didn't have version 2 yet. So I believe version 2, it does say you need an iPad 2 or higher. It works great on minis as well because the mini has the same resolution as the other, same resolution as the iPad 2, and the 3 and 4 are twice the resolution, so it's still the same proportions. So yeah, absolutely, any of the iPads that are out there. Not the 1 really.
Question from Beauty of the Lake is wondering, what is the basic difference then between an interactive PDF ebook and an iBook?
The difference between them, the interactive PDF, you are limited on some of the interactivity that's there, and most PDF apps that are on the iPad actually can't handle the interactivity yet, and I'm not really sure why. You can do things like, you know, have next page and previous page, but if you had some animation or something like that in there, it does not translate, it does not work on most of the iPad or the PDF reading apps on the iPad. So the iBooks author ones, of course, give you all that interactivity. Now, if you're making a PDF for the computer with interactivity, it's pretty similar. There's different things that it does, but they each have interactivity. I think where the ease comes in with iBooks Author is that it's widgets, drag and drop. And the interactivity, you don't have to build. It's just there. You just drop it in and it goes. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
We've got some questions about iTunes Producer.
Design Central. Can we leave those to the afternoon, I think? I think
yeah,
we want to get the
absolutely.
I think we want to wait till we get something to actually look at, and then we'll talk about all the ins and outs of the actual producing
Sounds
it. Because I'm going to walk through the steps of actually doing that as well.
Okay,
so
fantastic.
Tag that for later. Good. Maybe one more, and then we'll...
Yeah, let's do one more. This is actually a good question, too. This is from NICU7181. And they would like to know, does iBooks integrate with other non-Apple products like PowerPoint or SlideRocket?
As far as using those,
I'm guessing as far as the drag and drop functionalities that you were showing
earlier? Pretty much you're limited to Keynote as far as the interactivity. Now you could take your PowerPoint and you can open that in Keynote and you could save it as a Keynote file and drop it in. So if you have something in there, you can actually, it's a couple extra steps, but you can get it into Keynote. Keynote actually takes a lot of different files as well. So
okay, fantastic.
File formats.